Welcome to Centaur Financial Services podcast. The information provided on and made available through this video and podcast does not constitute as financial product advice. The information is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice. We recommend that you obtain your own independent professional advice before making any decision in relation to your particular requirements or circumstances.
Hello, welcome back everyone to our next podcast in our retirement series. My name's Anthony Mirandilla and I have here Nick Georgopoulos alongside to go through what is going to be some excellent content today. We've done a lot in the retirement space, and as we move through the twilight years of retirement, we get into our aged care area. Unfortunately, it does come around and we as advisors do see it quite a bit, not just with those people having to go into those styles of homes, but also importantly the families that have to work through that process and what it does look like. And Nick's going to take us through a few things today in terms of what that does look like, because from what my understanding of it is, it's just such a complex area where
it is, yes.
A lot of people get caught up in the process, the government antics of it all and how it really works, and along with just dealing with the fact that you're putting a near relative or a very dear relative into these facilities. It's just such a difficult process. So we did want to give you a bit of insight to what aged care was about, some upcoming changes with legislation from July this year. So Nick, mate, I might start. Just what are these key things with aged care and what are the areas that people are looking at?
Yeah, great question. So if we just define when we talk about aged care, there's probably two main components to it that we should be considering. Now, I'll only go through one of them today because it is complex and it will take a long time to go through both. So today I'll go through more so the residential aged care, so moving into a residential aged care facility. However, it is important to highlight that aged care also does extend to assistance and care whilst remaining at home. Currently we call that home care. And there's a lot of changes on the horizon with this, enhancement of packages and funding options and a few tweaks and changes in there. So that might be something I go through at a later date. Now, focusing back to residential aged care, if we define what that effectively is, it's moving into a facility where you're now living, where you're able to get the required assistance because you've hit a level of health or your health has deteriorated to a point where it's just no longer safe or reasonable for you to stay home. So a lot of what these facilities have is on-site care and medical staff, and it does start at different levels as well. We do have just more lower care right up to high care needs, such as things like dementia, but it does not encompass retirement villages, over 50s villages. So just to give you a bit of an idea of what we're looking at there. So 1st July, big circle in the calendar there. There are major changes coming into it and they are significant. So definitely a great time to highlight this. I'll go through what some of those changes are, but I think a good starting point is why. If we think back, it wasn't too long ago, 2021, we saw a Royal Commission into aged care and really highlighted a lot of the faults and a lot of the issues in that sector. What it's come down to, how I see it anyway, is a lack of funding or a lack of profitability from these areas, and this is what a lot of the changes are now trying to resolve.
Sure.
If we think in the 22-23 financial year, 46% of all residential aged care facilities ran at a loss. Okay, so it's not a profitable sector. And what does that now mean? It's if we don't have a profitable facility, a profitable sector, the level of care and the quality of service diminishes. So if we can get it to a point where it is now profitable, we can hire more staff, we can hire highly trained staff, overall we should see an uplift in quality, which is what we all want. But what does that mean? What does all of those facts mean? Essentially it means that we, or those moving into aged care, pay more. And that happens from both the government side but also the resident side, and that's something that we'll see.
I had a client the other week, mate, who sort of mentioned they'd been looking at getting, or the partner was getting her husband into care, and they sort of had a place and facility lined up, and they were going to pay a refundable accommodation deposit at the time, $500,000. But now they've been pushed out of that said contract, and it's more potentially looking at like 550, 600,000. Is this sort of why? And is it that because it's on these changes coming into place?
A part of that, yeah. So from 1st of July, if we're thinking what the charge for a room is, we can call it a room charge, we could call it a refundable accommodation deposit. Effectively what it is, it's the price you pay to have your spot in the room. Now, this does get refunded back to you if you ever leave the facility or pass away, it gets refunded back to the estate. As we currently sit this side of the financial year, the maximum a facility can charge for a room is $550,000 without getting additional approval. Right. So going through that. From 1st of July, that increases to $750,000.
Okay.
So it would be expected that if you don't need to go through a full formal approval process, you'll start to see a lot of the prices for these rooms creep up. And that could be, as your example say, if we're looking at entry on the other side of the financial year, it's going to be quite a significant high level there.
Okay.
I did say most of it is getting refunded. However, what they're also bringing in 1st of July is a retention fee. Something we haven't seen before. Effectively, let's call it that $750,000. Now the aged care facility can maintain or retain 2% of that refundable accommodation deposit amount for a 5-year period. So 10% all up.
Yeah.
So that's held on to at the time again of leaving or getting refunded to the estate. But on that $750,000, $775,000 that you're leaving without now. On the other side, we have what we call DAP, daily accommodation payments.
Yeah.
And that's the alternative of not paying that lump sum, right? So for those that don't have the means or money, they may opt to pay the daily accommodation payment. And effectively that is just calculated of what the room RAD fee would be times an interest rate, or the maximum permissible interest rate. Changes there is now that is going to be indexed with inflation.
Okay.
Usually it's a set amount, currently 8.17%,
right?
Quite high.
Yeah.
So again, that DAP, you don't retain that though, you don't get that refunded back.
Okay.
So very different if we're working off like the DAP rates there on that $750,000. Your annual rent, I suppose you could call it, would be $61,275.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's significant.
It's significant, mate. And from my understanding of things as well, you can sort of use them together, right? And
of course.
Think, with these changes, potentially gives rise to a bit more of a strategy approach and what you can do there as well too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And aged care is such a complex area that go seek professional advice.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different ways. Don't make the decisions when you're in the hospital finding an aged care facility. Plan ahead. Discuss it with your family prior and understand, well, what are the funding options available?
Yeah, absolutely.
From the funding perspective, we're thinking about what are the costs of aged care.
Yeah.
We've spoken through the daily accommodation payment or the refundable accommodation deposit options there. We also have something called a basic daily fee. Now, this is something that everybody pays, whether you're high asset level or low. It's effectively 85% of what the full age pension is, around $23,000 per annum.
Okay.
A little bit over that. There's an introduction to a new fee called a hotelling fee. It's a maximum of $12.55 per day, and that's a means-based fee there.
Yep.
We've also got a means-tested care fee. It starts to really add up as you're doing the math in your head. This will be renamed a non-clinical care fee, and again, based off assets or income. That is going to be up to a maximum of $101 per day, $37,000 per annum. There is a cap on that, $130,000 total paid there, or 4 years.
Sure. So
if you only pay that for 4 years from 1st of July. So what does that all mean? Like, as an example, I'll show you what that change looks like. Okay.
It is.
So someone that had entered care prior to 1st of July, let's say they are a single age pensioner, paid a $550,000 refundable accommodation deposit, $700,000 in the bank. Okay, quite easy. Now, before 1st of July, what those ongoing costs would look like is $41,238. Okay, so funded from the capital there, bit of age pension, that's fine. After 1st of July, with the changes to these rules, again, same person, 550,000 refundable accommodation deposit spent, 700,000 bank. They would be paying $75,707. So
That's a significant uplift.
almost 35,000.
Yeah. Okay. It's just the mind boggles with legislation and how quick things change.
Yes.
And again, just going to Nick's point of just having a conversation with the likes of a person of Nick's experience just helps significantly in terms of the decision-making process, and just me sitting here and hearing these types of examples just is scary in realness of how important it is to get the right advice. Mate, are there any other things that we need to be aware of in terms of the old legislation or what was?
Yeah, it's a good point. If the thing that many would be asking is, okay, I'm currently in aged care. Am I about to pay significantly more?
Yeah.
The answer is no, with an asterisk.
Okay.
Okay, so the previous rules, if you're in care at 1st of July, they are grandfathered arrangements. You will be under the old rules. If you are under those arrangements but do leave a aged care facility for longer than 28 days, you'll revert to the new rules. Okay, so that could be a number of reasons, right? You could be changing facilities.
Yeah.
You might be staying in the same one but going home for a little while.
Yeah.
So a few things there, but if you go over that 28 days, you're under the new rules. So a lot of consideration to be made. That is something you're thinking about doing.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, mate. That was
Pleasure.
Enlightening, and we really appreciate that. So, guys, as always, we really do appreciate your feedback, and importantly, if you did have any questions regarding this topic, we know how complex it is, especially with a couple of the changes that we've sort of gone through today. So would implore you to have a chat with your advisor. If you didn't have one, to please reach out. Aside from that, thank you, Nick.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, mate, and we'll see you on our next podcast. Cheers.